Hey everybody, welcome back into the garage and welcome back to the 300ZX Turbo project. This video is part 3 in a series that we're looking at the restoration of the leather seats in the car. Okay, so like I said in the first intro, this is part 3 on seats. This is the driving seat out of my 86 GLL Turbo, and as you can see it is well past its sell-by date, so it needs extensive restoration. This is a power seat, so it's got power controls here and it's got adjustments on these side bolsters here, things like that. That's different than the passenger seat, which is all manual on my car. So the first 2 videos were working on the manual or much less complex seats. What I plan to do now is try and show how I go about taking this one apart and the differences. The things like putting the leather on, etc., should be the same on all of them. So this is just looking at the differences of dealing with the power, the motors, the tubes for the air pump up system, etc. So let's see if we can get it apart. I've got the rigid back off the car here. There's 4 screws. Screw here, these brackets. So it's 4 screws. That pops off. This is what I'm left with. There's electrical and there's pneumatic hoses for all these bladders that sit down here, sit in the side lumbar supports. I've got power coming up here from where it plugs in on the cushion, under the cushion, that I need to be able to disconnect somehow because I want to take the back off. Well, I have to take the back off the cushion to do this. So I'm going to see. I'm going to start disconnecting some of the flaps and things here just to gain access to see where the cable routing is and figure out where the best place to unplug things are. Okay, so starting to try and get the back separated from the cushion here. This is the outboard side where all the power switches are. So there's a screw that holds a little knob on here. That's the access to the back of the car that just flips the seat forward. And then there's 3 screws that hold this plastic trim on. There's 1 plug here to undo, and this at least pulls away. I haven't dealt with this side yet, but this gives me access to the 2 bolts here for the recliner being attached to the cushion frame. The other side is a free pivot, just like the manual seat. So it's just 1 17mm socket to take that off. And then I've unclipped this back here. And you see we have a power line here with a ground screw that goes back up into the back. And we've got an air line here, this black air line that goes up in here. That's going to have to be disconnected somewhere. So we can do the power stuff's easy, of course. We'll get the bolts out and we'll see how disconnected this ultimately becomes. So all these pneumatic lines have these connectors on them, and I know these are going to be delicate things because they've got O-rings in them and they're expected to hold air pressure. Hopefully when they go back together, they still will. But if you put your hand under, your finger under here and squeeze that open, you can then pull them apart. There we go. So that's it apart. You can see the O-ring there. So at least I know how they come apart now. And they are somewhat color-coded anyway. I think I've got enough disconnected to get the back away from the cushion now. All right, so working on the back, I've just flipped this back so it's easier to see. I've taken the two bolts off, nuts rather, off the outboard bolster here. There's electrical plug to disconnect, and there are two air lines here. One disconnects here, and then this blue one will disconnect here. And I think this side bolster will then come off and we can see what's inside it. So this is the other side, the side bolster with the switches all in it. So when it comes out, you've got, that's a black air line that goes over to the other side. That's the blue one that goes to the other side. And then you've got the red, blue, and yellow ones, which hook up to the, the three bladders here. And then you end up with this tiny little wire harness that runs through, connects up under the cushion, connects there, and connects here. So that's effectively it. I'm assuming when this comes apart, I'm going to find an airbag under here and one under here. And I'm guessing this is the inflator, air pump, whatever. So the back itself, with that all disconnected, is not that much different than the manual seat in terms of covering it. So that shouldn't be that complex to do. I think these are going to be trickier to do, but it's apart and it's not quite as bad as I thought. I'm hoping all these O-rings will seal. I've checked what best lubricant to put on them before they go in. Hopefully those will all seal again. So I'll take those two bolts out for the power recliner out of the way, and that back is now ready to strip and recover, and so are these. So once we got the leather off, it looks very much like the passenger side one, the manual one, except there's this air bladder here for pumping up the side. And in my case, I've got to patch a piece of foam in here because this is the driver's side and it's well worn away. So we'll get the other side off, see what that looks like. So once you have everything taken apart here, the driver's side, or fully electric or whatever you want to call it, seat back is basically identical to the manual passenger side, except for this air bladder and the hoses here, which should have no effect on putting the leather on, other than just be careful and don't put a hole in it. So it should wrap exactly the same. Okay, so onto the seat cushion, the seat base, the bottom, the seat, whatever you want to call it. And start getting this apart now. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking the tracks off, and I assume it's going to come off with all this motor assembly in place. Now, like the passenger side one, you undo two bolts at one end and then you have to move the track to access the two bolts at the other end. This is the power seat, so you need power to it. So what I've just done is I got the two bolts out at this end. I then put it back into the car, connected the battery back up, and using these switches that I haven't started disconnecting yet, I powered the seat, well, in my case forward, to reveal this bolt and this bolt that comes in here, so I can take those apart. The only area of concern I have for this is this spring. It's a heavy duty spring. That's for the lift. I'm assuming it must assist in some way on it. And I'm not sure once I disconnect this how much tension, but we're going to get that off. And then obviously we will have to unplug some stuff here for this this motor to release that as well. Okay, so I've disconnected this drive here. It's just a little square drive, much like you would get on an old-fashioned speedometer or a tachometer. So I just unthreaded that so I can disconnect this side from this side. So I've got to unclip some wire harness things now. It appears that spring is not actually part of this. So what you got to do for this side of the track, you've got to unplug the power to the motor here. There's a little ground strap you've got to unscrew. You've got to release the cable that loops down here, and it'll lift out of the way too. So there's your track system now out of the way. So what you're left with is effectively the up-down portion. There's the motor here on this other bracket. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to have to take that apart or not. And yeah, I've got to get all this disconnected now so I can pull all this out of the way. So again, it's just hoses and electrical plugs. I'm marking them so I don't get them all mixed up, although chances are they're relatively error-proof or idiot-proof, depending if you're politically correct. Okay, so once you get your old leather seat off, and you get the foam released, same way I did it on the passenger seat, you're going to be left with the seat frame here, very much like the one on the passenger side, a little different down here. The biggest difference, I mean, apart from all the spring and assorted stuff there for all the different mechanisms, is it's got the bladder here. It's got one bladder. It's got a protective cover on the top and a protective cover on the bottom. And what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to use my rubberized vinyl sort of from here back. I'm going to leave this. It's in really good shape. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. Okay, so that's the rubberized vinyl back on like the passenger side. I did in the end take this all apart, take it out and just put this under and reattach this. So the bladder's back on here now. It's ready to put the foam on. I'm going to do some repairs to the foam, cut some pieces in and reinforce some areas, and then we'll get the foam back on here. We're ready to start trying to get the leather on. All right, so we're assembling the seat back now. The side bolsters, of course, just slip on, and the studs go through the holes there and put the nuts on. The only thing you got to do is make sure you're routing the airlines correctly. Make sure nothing gets pinched. You'll have the small little power harness here, so that's got to route through, so it goes down to the seat cushion, as does the black airline. And then of course the harness just hooks up there and here, and then your airlines are just a matter of snapping them back together. The only thing I've seen is on the original seat cushions, this whole side here is open, so this yellow line will run through there to the bladder, the part of the bladder here, I'm just going to route it through this way. I'm going to bend that down and route it through that way. And then when I put these together, I'm just going to be using a silicone grease. It's actually, this was a brake lube, but just because it was in a tiny little pack and I don't really need much of this. Exactly the same thing. It's just a silicone lubricant. You don't want to use anything petroleum based because that'll start to rot these O-rings. And our hope is these will seal up again and hold the air properly so these pump up air bladders work. I have everything hooked up here now. All the airlines, the electrical, new zip tie, that's where the one was from the factory. Plastic trim here and here slipped in. You have to actually put that one in before you put this side bolster on. One thing I do now is wrap these two over and hog ring tie them down, and then it just needs the rigid back cover to go on, and that seat back is ready. Okay, getting ready to put the seat cushion at the bottom back together here. The leather's on. There's nothing special to show on the leather there. It's much like virtually identical to the passenger side one. So same techniques. This is the one I figured out the trick for trying to get some of the creases out of the bolster. So anyway, we're ready now. What I'm going to do next is put the seat tracks back on. And as it was taking them off, you've got to put one bolt in on each side and then power them to expose the second bolt. So I'm going to get both tracks hooked back up, put the control panel, get that hooked back up again so the buttons will work, and because that's all been off and repainted, and then just hook it up quickly in the car, move that so I can finish that up, and then I can finish putting the seat together. I have both recliners on now with the two accessible bolts in this case at the front. I have the drive from the motor here with the little square rod that sits in there hooked back up. Routed all these lines from the panel here up through here. You got 3 plugs to plug in here. You have 2 vac hoses or air hoses. One that goes to the bladder at the front here, and then this one will go to the seat back. You've got a ground strap here to put on. This one plugs into the car, and you've got another plug here to go in, and then this one should plug into the tiny little harness wires that come off the seat back when it gets routed through here. So that's, once we get this hooked up, we can put it in the car, power this forward, or the seat back, I believe, and access the 2 fasteners there. And then we'll have the track all back on and it close to being ready to put the seat back to it. Okay, so I've got everything together here. I've just propped the seat in here so I can keep an eye and make sure the tracks are moving properly. Plugged it in, the battery hooked up again. And in theory, if I push this, I actually want the seat to go back. We should move these tracks forward. There we go. Okay, so we can see that fastener there, and we can see this one here. Perfect. Okay, so I got the back attached to the seat cushion now. There's not much to show really. This recliner here has 2 bolts, 14 mil socket, one in here, one down here somewhere. It's got the one free pivot with the 17 mil socket on the other side. It's a little bit of a tussling match to get this seated. This is the cover that goes over the motor here and get that tucked in here. Sort of sits on a little shelf there. 3 screws. Put the cover back on. 1 screw to put the little knob back on there. And then flip it over, and we've got a black air line to hook up, and we've got the power cord that takes the power up to the back to hook up, and 1 more ground to put there. And it should then be ready to put in the car. The only thing I should mention, I didn't on your seat back, assuming you have these power things, you're going to have to do the cutout for that. There is nothing obviously that comes with this, so you've got to cut it out, screw the cover on. I got the seats in now, plugged in, bolted in. I've tested everything, all the air bladders work, all the power works up and down and everything else. So well pleased with that. Looks epically better. Worth the effort, worth all the stretching and pulling and everything else and figuring out how it goes together to bring these seats back to near new, I think. So hopefully that's part 3. Hopefully the series there was helpful to you if you're working on the seats. And as a reminder, part 1 was the disassembly of the manual. Part 2 was the covering with the leather and the reassembly, and a lot of part 2 applies for the manual seat and the full power seat as well. And then what I did in part 3 was just look at all the what you have to disassemble and put back together when you're dealing with the power seat and all the pneumatics, all the air pumps, etc. So I hope it was helpful to you. Good luck if you're working on your seats. Hope to see you back here in the garage. And in the meantime, you drive safe, everybody, and have just an awesome day out there.